Given that level of scrutiny, I think I'd even worn a Yankees hat. Okay, maybe not a Yankees hat, but you get the dilemma.
All right, let's break this down, because this latest round of royal chaos is honestly one of the most bizarre and unintentionally funny messes we've seen from Prince Harry in a while. Between being booed in Canada over a baseball cap, embarrassing apologies on live TV, and more behind-the-scenes family drama involving King Charles and Prince William, it feels like every royal thread is starting to unravel at once. So, grab a cup of tea, or maybe some of Meghan's jam, because this is a wild one. So, picture this.
Disaster for Prince Harry in Canada, as his LA Dodgers faux pas sees him booed on stage by furious members of the Commonwealth who think that this dude, who is meant to be representing them, has been nothing but a traitor in recent weeks. And the self-deprecating humour from the lad who used to be a bit of a cheeky chappy just doesn't cut it anymore as a miserable 40-something. Watch what went down.
Second, the 900,000 watt floodlights shining down on an ever-increasing bald spot. And given that level of scrutiny, I think I'd even worn a Yankees hat. Okay, maybe not a Yankees hat, but you get the dilemma.
And he spent his entire remembrance trip to Canada trying to deal with the hat faux pas, which only happened because his wife dragged him to this baseball match that he knew nothing about to try and promote the launch of her new flop food products. As Hans on X pointed out, so Harry's finally trying to make fun of himself. Probably the first time I've ever seen him do it. He's finally listening. During his speech, he discussed his baldness and said, "I wanted to wear a Yankees hat." The crowd started booing him. What a joker. And what's so interesting is that the day before, in a national television interview, Prince Harry had to apologize to the entire country, but it still didn't stop him getting booed. Watch.
I think you'd like to say it all about wearing that LA Dodgers hat last week and getting it in hot
LA
water.
Dodgers hatgate. Well, firstly, I would like to apologise to Canada for wearing it. Secondly, I was under duress. There wasn't much choice. I was invited to the LA Dodgers box, or the dugout, by the owner himself, so I was doing what I thought was the polite thing to do. But I'm going to wear this from now on to make sure I don't make any more of those mistakes. But the other piece to this was, as you could probably relate, when you're missing a lot of hair on top and you're sitting under floodlights, you'll take any hat that's available. So, Game 5, Game 6, Game 7, I was Blue Jays throughout. Now that I've admitted that, it's going to be really hard for me to return back to Los Angeles. But no, I'm very sorry to the Canadian public. Devastated that the Blue Jays lost, but go Jays.
Oh, Brittany, editor of the Royal News Network. This was mortifying. It overshadowed the entire trip, and still, he was booed on stage.
Prince Harry, in Canada for a remembrance event, is standing on stage trying to be his old cheeky self again. The once lovable Joker Prince cracks a self-deprecating joke about his balding head and how he wanted to wear a Yankees hat. Cute, right? Except, no. The crowd starts booing him. Yep, booing. Why? Because this hat wasn't just a hat. It was a symbol of everything that's gone wrong with Harry's image lately. Just a few days earlier, he'd been photographed at a baseball game in Los Angeles, sitting in the Dodgers VIP box, wearing their team cap.
Absolutely. And Dan, part of this whole mess is that Harry doesn't understand baseball. And it's like, why are you even talking about this? Why are you apologizing? Why did you do any of this? We know he has other ball caps he could have worn, but his wife wanted them to basically be matchy-matchy. And so it's just sort of obnoxious. And I can't imagine anything more annoying to actual LA Dodgers fans than finding out this guy didn't really care, didn't really know anything, sat there in the hat in these probably free seats that were provided by PR, and just was complete. And then later to the Blue Jays goes, "Well, I was rooting for you games 5, 6, and 7. I'm like, but what about games 1, 2, and 3? He I guess, completely forgot about those. Who knows? This guy is just an epic train wreck. It's just a disaster on so many levels. About how he even described it is like he was under duress because he got to go sit in the owner's box by, the third base. I'm like, that's not really duress unless your wife was forcing you to do it, which we all know is the
She
case.
was.
And he basically confirms it.
She was.
Okay. I was like, she forced you to wear the hat.
I'm cucked and I'm bald. It's like that's all he has to say. And I mean, look, he was going through that date night with total duress. Mm-hmm. It was all done, Brittany, because things move so fast at the moment in the world of the Sussexes. But remember, she was launching her new Was Never products that day. So she needed to get the headlines. This was how she did it. But again, no thinking about the fact, like, holy crap, next week, we're in Canada. Harry needs to have natural allegiance to Commonwealth countries. It just shows you their whole strategy is a mess. But I really feel like he's lost any sense of who he is because all he can talk about on stage now is his balding head and the pressure his wife puts him under. That's it. There is nothing else left.
And what's really funny, Dan, of course, is that he sort of made a big dig at his brother in his memoir, talking about his brother's going bald. And now he's actually worse.
Balding, wasn't it, Brittany?
Yeah. Something to that effect. And he's actually worse, I think, because Harry's just holding on to these little tufts of hair in the front because the rest of it just looks unbelievably bad. And he's almost worse because he's trying to hold on to his hair, the little he has left, even more than his brother did. And when it comes to even Meghan Markle, the crazy thing about this whole baseball thing is that there's no real Venn diagram where baseball and as ever clients would be like intersecting. Really, that just doesn't exist. It was a terrible way to actually promote her own brand. And either Harry or somebody on the team, nobody got it and just went ahead and did it. And it just, I think, optically looked terrible. They looked terrible being there in the front because it was so obviously for attention. Sydney Sweeney was there too, but she was there in part promoting her upcoming movie, which did flop. But she was there promoting a sports movie. Harry and Meghan were there to support and promote a brand that sells spread. It's like, it just doesn't make any sense. And the hat gate was totally avoidable. And he could have just asked, hey, can I wear a Blue Jays hat? But of course, he didn't even think about the optics of Canada because he admits he only thought about it after people complained. So this guy is just clueless when it comes to any of this. He should have just kept his mouth shut and let it blow over because that's exactly what it was doing. But no, he had to drag it back up into the spotlight again.
Yeah, I mean, that passage in Spare Brittany, he wrote, I really looked at Willie, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time since we were listening, taking in every detail his familiar scowl, which had always been the norm in his dealings with me. He then added that William's baldness was alarming and more advanced than mine, and that he thought William's resemblance to their mother, Princess Diana, had faded. And so this is a painful moment for Harry because what we saw happen in Brazil last week, Brittany, was William returned to being a heartthrob. There's sort of been a full circle moment, when he took his socks off and got involved on the volleyball, the beach volleyball pitch. And of course, he has embraced his aging. He's got the beard now, which the late Queen Elizabeth II never allowed him to have. And the Mail's writing, William is a heartthrob again. Yet Harry is so clearly uncomfortable with his looks now. So it's quite interesting, isn't it, how even since Spare there has been such a marked change.
Not exactly a crime, but for a guy who was about to head to Canada, part of the Commonwealth, and represent the royal family, it was terrible optics. Canadian fans took it as an insult, a slap in the face. He might as well have waved the Dodgers flag while shouting, "Go USA," at a Blue Jays game. This whole saga
There really has. I think Harry is, of course, very self conscious anymore. And a lot of that will probably come from the fact that his wife has emasculated him so much, I think, that he has no really sense of self, no sense of purpose. He is a backseat passenger in their relationship. She obviously now has as well her new ventures that don't involve him at all. So he very much, I think, is on unstable ground and is very much just insecure. Whereas William is very secure in who he is, the projects he wants to pursue. Obviously, as well, he will be the future king, which I'm sure definitely helps a bit. But Harry could have been very successful as well in the role as Spare. But part of Harry's chip on his shoulder is that he resents his brother for being the heir and being more important than he is. And then you factor in all the stuff with Meghan, and it's just all a disaster. Whereas William, I think some of the attraction you could say is just that he seems secure. He was very active in beach volleyball. He was doing very well. And so he is a guy who's secure in who he is, and that is attractive. Whereas Harry is just all over the place, a disaster led around by his wife, and somehow thinks he's still somewhat in charge of his life when we all know that's not the case. So Harry is definitely an absolute train wreck. And I think William did a fantastic job in Brazil last week.
But Brittany, new reporting from Tom Sykes in The Royalist reveals that William was angry. And he was angry for two reasons. And this is like history repeating, Brittany, because it is the diary clashes not just from his younger brother, but also his father, King Charles, and the timing of that investiture for David Beckham. So let me take you through this reporting, Brittany. It's really fascinating. Tom Sykes writes, the Royalist has learned that Prince William was left hurt and angry after his father, of all people, stole the spotlight from him last week, staging a headline-grabbing investiture for David Beckham as William's Earthshot Awards were kicking off in Brazil. For William, who has spent 5 years turning the prize into his signature platform, the timing, even though the investiture was long scheduled, was more than a clash of diaries. It was seen, according to friends, as a deliberate snub. The decision by King Charles to knight Beckham on Tuesday, 14 years after his name was first floated for the honour, was greeted by William's friends with disbelief. Of all weeks, one friend of William's told The Royalist, this was the 1 week he needed the family to be pulling for him. Instead, it felt like they were pulling against him. He was left hurt and angry. The Earthshot Prize, conceived by William to fund climate innovation through 5 $1.3 million grants awarded annually, is the most precise articulation of how he intends to reign: practical, global, and apolitical. This year's ceremony, held in Rio de Janeiro, was meant to signal both his maturity and his father's trust, with William also representing the king at the COP30 environmental conference in Berlin later in the week. But instead of the seamless royal choreography, William envisaged his trip unravelled into a succession of distractions. The family sabotaged it from beginning to end, the William friend said. It was pathetic, like the worst of the bad old days. On the day his plane landed, Prince Harry's team announced a parallel quasi-royal tour of Canada, scheduled miraculously to overlap with William's itinerary. Meghan Markle's PR team then leaked news of her return to acting to The Sun midweek, instantly derailing British coverage of the Earthshot Prize. The irritant of the Sussexes is old and familiar. What stung William more, I am told, was the betrayal from inside the tent. David Beckham had waited 15 years, said a former courtier, and they had to do it this week. When you think of how gracious William had been, paying tribute to his father's work in his speech, it's a slap in the face. I'm afraid Charles still can't bear not to be the centre of attention. If he couldn't be at COP30 himself, then nobody else was allowed to have the moment. The king's allies insist it was a coincidence, without malice. His Majesty is immensely proud of his son's work, a friend of Charles told the Daily Beast. Investitures are scheduled months in advance. One friend of the king, however, did concede that there is an increasingly delicate father-son dynamic, dramatically worsened by William's open contempt for the shambolic way his father handled the ex-Prince Andrew crisis and continues to handle the Harry issue. Since the king's terminal cancer diagnosis, the balance of royal power has shifted. William is now increasingly demanding the right to lead long-term planning, public messaging, and, crucially, crisis management. As the friend put it, the change of reign is happening in real time, whether they admit it or not. Charles, however, has no intention of fading into the background. He insists on maintaining a full public schedule, sometimes the alarm of Camilla and his doctors, and he guards the symbols of kingship, audiences, investitures, the odd glittering photo call as fiercely as ever. Friends say that having waited his whole life for this role, he's not about to start taking instruction from anyone, even his son. The Beckham affair, trivial on its face, is the perfect metaphor. The king, ill but determined, still demands to be the headline act. The heir, already governing, in many people's minds, is trying to build something lasting in the space his father won't vacate. The king sometimes feels he's been airbrushed out of his own legacy, one family friend said. It's not deliberate on William's part, but there's a cold professionalism about him. The message is, the future starts now. Charles finds that almost unbearable. In the Amazon, one of the scripted remarks William delivered was about the duty each generation owes the next. It seems William doesn't think his father has got the message. So, Brittany, very deeply reported there from Tom Sykes, and I think fairly, actually, because he presents both sides of the argument. Yes, the Sussexes are just out of control, and I think we can agree that Meghan Markle leaking her return to acting on the day Prince William delivered his speech at the Earthshot Prize, pushing the star-studded Earthshot off the British front pages, was a low blow but completely expected from a woman like that. Likewise, Harry's tour to Canada. Brittany, I can't understand for a single second why the Beckham investiture had to clash with William's big moment in Brazil. I don't get it. And both Buckingham Palace and the Sussexes have used this argument, Brittany, of, oh, but you know, our diaries were planned months in advance. I'm sorry, you've known the date of the Earthshot Prize since long before that. So that is not an excuse, I'm afraid.
From a misplaced hat to a full-blown family feud, shows how fragile the royal image has become. Every choice, every event, every PR stunt turns into a headline, and the cracks between the generations are now impossible to hide. Harry's trying to be relatable, but has lost his identity. Meghan's chasing headlines, but burning bridges. Charles is clinging to relevance, and William's quietly taking control. And through it all, the public, whether in Canada, Brazil, or back home in Britain, is watching the House of Windsor turn into its own worst enemy. So yeah, maybe Harry should have just skipped the baseball game. Because that one hat didn't just cause a PR blunder. It became a symbol of everything wrong with this new royal era. Confused loyalties, tone-deaf PR, and a family that can't stop sabotaging itself. At this point, even a Yankees hat might have been less controversial. Let me know what you think about this video in the comment section. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of my future uploads. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments.